Welcome to Go. We're reviewing the Grand Prix from Brazil. They're calling it the Sao Paulo Grand Prix. It's round 18 of the 2021 World Championship. It's the 38th Grand Prix we've had at the Interlagos circuit, and I'm delighted to be joined here tonight on the show, this morning, depends where you are in the world, of course, by the gentleman who finished 13th in the Brazilian Grand Prix in 2002. His name is Alex Yoong. Alex, welcome from Kuala Lumpur. It's great to have you with us tonight. What do you think of the Grand Prix?
Gosh, I'm so shocked with that stat. Yeah, I really enjoyed the Grand Prix. Just what the championship needed. You know, we've seen the championship get hotter and hotter as the years progressed. And wow, a Hamilton win from last on the grid on Saturday. Started 10th today. What a win. I mean, that was one of his best drives, I feel. Right up there.
Fantastic. And we're joined also tonight, a very special guest, Australian racing royalty, I think it's fair to say. His name is David Brabham, and he joins us from London. Welcome, David.
Yeah, hi guys. How you doing? Thanks for having me on the show.
Just a quick introduction to David. I'm sure everybody knows you, David, but I think we've got some images of when you raced yourself in Formula One, of course, 1990 in the Brabham car, and then in 1994, this is the Brabham in 1990 at Monaco, and then in 1994, of course, for the Simtech team, you followed in your father's footsteps, of course, Sir Jack, world champion 3 times, and David with a very successful career across motorsport, but particularly in sports cars, and winning the 2009 Le Mans 24 Hours. So let's have a look now at the results of the Brazilian Grand Prix, or the Sao Paulo Grand Prix, I should call it, and to remind ourselves of what happened in the race tonight. Of course, the Grand Prix, as Alex said, was won by Lewis Hamilton. Let's have a look at the results now. Won by Lewis Hamilton from Max Verstappen, with Lewis's teammate Valtteri Bottas in third, ahead of Sergio Perez in the second, Red Bull in fourth. David, give us your kind of immediate takeaway on that Grand Prix.
You know, I think we witnessed an amazing display, not just from Lewis, but from Mercedes too. When you think of, let's say, last race at Mexico, you know, Max was pretty dominant, and then, you know, they've come here to Brazil, and, you know, you just have to look at Lewis's car in qualifying. It just looked like it was on rails, and wherever he was going to start on that grid, he was always going to be a threat, and he drove out of his skin, never made mistakes, and put the pressure on Max, set him up nicely to position him to be able to get him you know, cleanly after the second attempt down into turn down turn 4, and just then controlled it after then. So, you know, I think he'll look back on this one with a great smile on his face, particularly as it sets him up to be a little bit closer in the championship battle with only 3 rounds to go.
Alex, do you agree? Is that one of Lewis's finer drives, do you think?
I think so. I mean, Lewis has always been one of F1's greatest racers. You know, the amount of overtaking, close battles he's had, and not had incidents, you know, not like Senna or Schumacher or Verstappen. Actually, sorry, Verstappen hasn't been that bad either, actually. But, you know, and that was such a clean race, 2 clean races yesterday and today, just making his moves work. And I thought after Verstappen had an incident and they ran wide at turn 4 and they went through the grass, I thought, okay, that's it, the moment's gone. Because you could see him trying to get close to Verstappen, and he, you know, running that dirty air, you overheat the tires, and I thought, nah, I can't see him doing this. But no, he kept at it. He got closer to Verstappen and made the move at the end, and it was just so impressive. You know, I rank it right up there.
Let's talk about, I think, the moment of the race for many people, certainly for me, was that, I think, lap 48. David, you mentioned it, turn 4, when we didn't see the onboard camera, but it looked to me like Max, well, I'm going to say, ran Lewis off the road to maintain the position. Is that your view of the incident?
Yeah, I think, you know, Lewis had a run on him. You know, he got DRS, he got beside him, and he was half a car length in front, and Max just braked that little bit later, knowing full well that really, you know, Lewis was on the outside, and all he had to do was just sort of squeeze him out a little bit, put him out into the rough. But both ended up going a lot further than I thought they would. I think it was down to more of a racing incident, but at the same time, Max knew exactly what he was doing at the same time. And I don't think any other driver would do anything different in the situation. It's racing, but most definitely he made Lewis head out to that sort of the other side of the circuit, just to keep him at bay.
But there's a problem with this, isn't there? And this is for us now to chat, the three of us, which is that it's very clear, the regulations, that if you maintain your position by forcing the other guy off the road, or yourself taking an advantage by going off the road, then you need to be penalised. And I don't understand why the race director either didn't refer it to the stewards, or the stewards felt there was no need to investigate.
I wasn't surprised in the decision, because it was a really hard decision to make. The stewards are under a lot of pressure, and there's a bit of a Verstappen rule comes into it sometimes, I feel. But like David said, in the old way of racing, perfectly legal. In my mind, when I was racing, if I'm on the inside and someone's going around the outside, I'm going to lean on him and push him on the grass, and away he goes, and it's completely fine. If I'm going to try and go around outside of someone, I'm really running that risk. But the FIA, there's two things here. So that's one, and the second thing, obviously, is FIA with being consistent. They are trying to force drivers and teams to give each other racing room, and I think it's a good thing, because it doesn't stop the racing. It allows the racing to continue, because it allows the overtaking to actually happen. If you are forced to leave a space for the racing, for the guy you're racing, especially on obviously as you're coming outside the corner, and especially when Hamilton was actually in front of Verstappen when they went to the corner. So you've seen FIA take action on those moves. I remember Perez and Austria getting out, but then it's not been consistent. We saw Verstappen take Honda's first win at A1 the Red Bull Ring, when he fed Leclerc out at turn 3. So the consistency is just not there, and I was surprised Verstappen didn't get a penalty, and hopefully there'll be I don't know where they go from this, to be honest, because it opens up a can of worms whenever the consistency is not there.
And especially in a weekend where there's already been, there's so much debate even before the racing started about differences. I think let's just say this straight away. I don't think any of us think that there's any bias within the system. Am I right?
I don't think there's any intentional bias. I think, and I got nothing to base this on, but we've seen it many times in the past where Senna would get favorable decisions, or when Schumacher had some favorable decisions. And when Verstappen first came in, Verstappen, the two moves down the straight where he almost took out Raikkonen at Spa, you're always a bit surprised. Whenever we see some new up-and-coming drivers, they sometimes get the rub of the green. I'm not going to say there's any intentional discrimination, certainly not. But, with such fine margins and nuances sometimes between decisions, you can't help thinking it.
Well, I'm going to take some pressure off. Oh, David, unless you've got anything to add on that part, have you?
I think, I agree with a lot of what's been said, for sure. But, one of the things that I think that let's say drivers on today's tracks have to deal with is that, the drivers know there's a lot of runoff, which, it's a lot on today's tracks compared to what I used to race. If you went out that wide, you're on the grass. So, they would have behaved very differently going into the corner, knowing that obviously if they went that wide and they went on the grass, they'd probably go off and either crash or lose too much time. But the fact that there is all this runoff now opens up, let's say, opportunities for this type of racing to exist. And I think for the stewards, they're balancing things all the time. And I'm sure they're thinking about, I think there were times when everybody was jumping on the FIA and the decisions that the stewards were making were being a little bit onerous. And then they were told to sort of loosen up. Then they loosen up, and this is kind of like a slightly loose situation. And there'll be people for and against. I think it just, obviously it made for exciting for us to watch, and luckily both cars got through. I thought actually when they went back on track, the way they jumped, that you may have seen, some damage to the cars, but they seemed to get through it okay, and the cars were behaving fine afterwards.
Yeah, good one. Changing subject slightly, David, because I want for our viewers to understand what you've been up to since you stopped racing full time, and tell us a little bit about your sports car project.
Yeah, sure. We 2018 we launched Brabham Automotive, and we produced a high performance track car called the Brabham BT62. And then when we launched, people said, look, can we race it? Can we put it on the road? So we now have 3 variants of the BT62, the ultimate track car, competition spec, and the BT62R, which is what you're seeing just there, which is the road version of the BT62. And we just recently launched the BT63, which is the yellow car there. We raced that at the Fanatec SRO GT2 European Series, which was the last round just to get the car into the championship and commit to next year. And it was a great debut. We qualified 3rd and 4th. We had a couple of issues in the race with one spin and an electrical issue, but the pace was there, second fastest lap of the race, and the car never tested before it got there, just a quick shakedown. So the momentum is now building for the business. There's a BT62R's just landed in New Zealand, and another competition spec BT62 is also in New Zealand with a different owner. They'll be racing that towards the end of the year when COVID kind of allows them in New Zealand. But it's an exciting project, and it's great to see the Brabham name back out there on such a cool project.
It's very pretty. It's fantastic. It's very pretty, and I think that's the coming to life, I suppose, and seeing in production. I rode with you, didn't I, at Albert Park in prototype of one of those, I guess.
Yep.
Yeah, just about recovered from that experience. It was quite something. You haven't lost any of your speed, David.
No, the car was designed to be fast. It broke the lap record at Bathurst, which is what we wanted to do for that type of vehicle. And it's an easy car to drive as well. It can be a bit daunting for people when they jump in, but everyone who's come out said, wow, I can't believe how easy this thing is to drive. And having driven in sports cars for as long as I have, working with different teammates with different driving styles, we needed to make sure that the window of performance and balance was quite wide, and that's what we were all able to achieve. And, we get fantastic feedback from people who have driven the vehicle.
I bet. Right, back to Formula One, and we've spoken about Lewis Hamilton, we've spoken about Max Verstappen. It's time to speak about the man who started on pole position, 3 poles out of 4 races, bizarrely enough, in a way. Valtteri Bottas finished 3rd here today. He was disappointed, it sounded like, with the strategy call. What do we think about that, Alex?
No idea, mate. I was a bit perplexed by it because I was like, 1-2. I didn't see what they could have done really to get a 1-2 because Red Bull were very clever to come in and pit when they did to head off the undercut that Mercedes would have tried, and one stop definitely wasn't possible, was it? Maybe Bottas thought one stop was possible. I think when he gets to the end of the race here to realize that one stop just wasn't going to work.
And I thought it was disappointing that his performance today was really not a patch on what we saw yesterday. But was that because he made a poor start? David, what do you think?
Consistent with the year, isn't it? I mean, Valtteri can be very fast. He's pushed Lewis on many occasions and been faster. But when it comes to the races, something just doesn't quite click. And I don't know what it is. Obviously, he had to support Lewis because obviously Lewis is going for the championship. But if you saw how quickly Lewis got past people, where Valtteri seems to struggle a little bit more, I don't know why that is. I'm assuming that everything is very similar with both cars, whether it's driving style or just his awareness of how to position himself to get past people when you're losing a bit too much aero. Because Lewis didn't seem to have many issues with it, but Valtteri seems to not quite get there. So I think that's something that's pretty consistent from what we've seen, and maybe part of the reason why he's moving on and George Russell is moving in his place.
Absolutely,
You make a good point.
Yeah, I just
carry
wanted
on.
to add to that. I mean, good points. But yeah, I mean, you could always see Hamilton's always hunting for space, isn't he? He's like putting one wing out the side to try and get some downforce, or he's just running wide at corners just to get out of the airflow. Not taking the optimum line sometimes, but it's better to not take the optimum line. But if you get the car to a bit of clean air, so he can follow the car in front, I think he does that quite well.
He does.
I agree.
Yeah, he
Yeah,
does.
and of course, yesterday he had the advantage. You see, he was on the soft tire, wasn't he, with Max on the medium, so he had a kind of grip advantage and hot tires advantage, heating up tires advantage. So that might have helped. So we look a little bit further back, looking at the results. Of course, Sergio Perez fourth, and that was, I think, because Valtteri got that cheap pit stop, didn't he? Because when the virtual safety car was out, that's when Valtteri really got ahead of Sergio. And then we got two Ferraris, Charles Leclerc ahead of Carlos Sainz, fifth and sixth. Ferrari, and they've jumped ahead. We'll look at the constructors' points later, but Ferrari really coming on strong towards the end of the season.
Yeah.
Who wants to have a go?
Yeah, I've been very impressed with them. They talked about the new engine upgrade, the latest engine upgrade that certainly helped them, and for sure that has. It sounds like they've got back on top of that since that readjustment. Was it over a year ago? But I also think it's also down to that clever rear suspension, because we always talk about that rear suspension that the Mercedes has, which is really good. It goes down and stalls the diffuser, and it's really good for straight line speed. But a lot of teams are using it. Ferrari are using it, and you can see the back of their car score a lot down the straights as well. Alpine are using it as well. But so I think Ferrari's upswing has been the engine upgrades have brought and the trick rear suspension.
Yeah, let's have if we can. I'm just asking our director to put the results back on the screen so we can remind ourselves, for those that weren't tuned in right at the beginning of the show. But I think one of the things that Ferrari have got now, I think they upgraded their hybrid system. The battery pack went from being a 400-volt system to 800-volt system. I'm not going to pretend that I know exactly what that means, the difference, but as I understand it, it means the power goes into and out of the battery. Here are the results. Only two retirements there, Daniel Ricciardo and Lance Stroll, and we can see the two Ferraris there, fifth and sixth. And Pierre Gasly, a pretty difficult race for him today, relatively speaking, started seventh and finished seventh. But the AlphaTauri ahead of the two Alpines, Ocon ahead of Alonso, and then Lando Norris, the sole McLaren to finish there in 10th. What do we think about Alpine's performance today? David?
Yeah, I think, for them, I think they had a fairly solid race. I don't think they're going to be able to do much more than what they're doing. The car's just not fast enough. It's a great battle between Alonso and Ocon, and I generally look at that with interest, but they're getting top 10, they're getting points, but they've got to take a big leap forward, as well as Ferrari, to get anywhere close to Mercedes and Red Bull. So it'd be interesting to see how that pans out for next year with the regs.
And have you been surprised, David, by the consistently strong performance of the AlphaTauri? I mean, it can't all be the Honda engine, can it?
Yeah, I have actually. I think when you look at that package, that's been very strong pretty much all year, and Pierre has just done a fantastic job every time. When you think of, how his time at Red Bull went, he was a bit lost and a bit all over the place, and then kind of went to the junior Red Bull team and such, and has just literally gone up so many levels to where he was, and he's a very consistent performer. And they are generally sometimes ahead of Ferrari and McLaren. So I think that team is doing a fantastic job with the kind of resources that they have.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, I should point out that Lando Norris started in fifth, finished 10th, but of course he got that puncture going into the first turn. Pulled in a bit sharply on Carlos Sainz, didn't he, Alex?
Yeah, I mean, Sainz squeezed him at first, but just left him enough room and came back. But then I think Lando just, he came back on the track and just came across him, didn't he? And they just touched. Racing incident for me. If anything, Norris was just a bit, I think, just got unsighted and just didn't give him quite enough space when he came back on the track. Shame for him. But yeah, I mean, McLaren are they're struggling now, aren't they? They're not going to beat Ferrari. Looks like Ferrari looking so strong at the moment, and it's going to be tough for them in that battle for third position in the championship.
Yeah. Well, before we move on to the Constructors and the Drivers' Championships, I want to just make mention of the Macau Grand Prix. Eagle-eyed viewers will notice at the bottom of our screen here, you'll see that we're promoting the 68th Macau Grand Prix. And let's talk about it a little bit. I think we've got some historical footage to show you while I tell viewers that don't know what the Macau Grand Prix is, that it's in particular, and has been since 1983, a race for Formula 3 cars. And it was a race that Lewis Hamilton starred in. He had pole position in 2004 in the Macau Grand Prix, and then Sebastian Vettel was on the podium on his first visit in 25. This is Lewis Hamilton, as I mentioned, in 2004. It unfortunately had a bit of a clash with somebody called Nico Rosberg going down to the first corner, and neither of them went on to feature in the results. There is Sebastian Vettel in 05. There was a classic battle in 1990 between this man, Michael Schumacher, and his nemesis. Went on to be nemesis Mika Hakkinen. There's Mika crashing, unfortunately, in 1990. And then, as I mentioned, Formula 3 started in Macau in 1983, and the winner in 1983, none other than Ayrton Senna, who, of course, went on to be a multiple world champion and one of the most famous names in the sport. And anybody, basically, who does well at the Macau Grand Prix, and this is Ayrton Senna in 83, is somebody that gets marked out for a future in Formula 1. And very quickly, Ayrton Senna went on the following year straight into Formula 1. And David Brabham, in fact, let's talk about you, David. So, David, you raced at Macau and you won it in 1989.
I've got fantastic memories of Macau, I really do, because I had a long season in the British Formula 3 Championship, and it was between really Alan McNish and myself, and we had a lot of legal problems in the background where protests were happening, and I lost my points, Alan lost his points, then the other team that Alan was racing with, West Surrey, who always done very well at Macau, protests appealed, and then anyway, I ended up the champion at the end of the year, not actually winning the championship. But if you looked at all the points I did, so when we went to the Macau Grand Prix, I had something to prove, and ended up winning the race, which was fantastic. And then later on, earlier the following year in 1990, I got declared the winner because everyone got their points back when the court case was heard. So, you know, I ended up winning the British F3 Championship and Macau in the same year. And when I look back with all the drivers that were in there at the time, you know, Hakkinen and Schumacher and Zanardi and McNish and all those guys, it was a big feather in the cap for me, and actually helped me propel myself into Formula 1.
So tell me then, David, how important, it sounds like very is going to be the answer, how important was the Macau Grand Prix for your career, and actually for any drivers, really?
Yeah, I mean, huge. Certainly at the time, you got a super license if you won, so that was a big prize to get. It was the FIA World Cup, and you had back then Formula 3 with lots of different countries with their own championships, and then the sort of grand final was at Macau, and the top driver there picked up the super license to hopefully then obviously get to Formula 1. So it was a massive thing for me to win, and anyone to win. Very pleased to have been able to have done that. And like I said, I've got great memories. I went back sort of maybe 20 years later, and obviously Macau's changed a lot since then in terms of the amount of buildings that are on, but the racing is still great. And I was there commentating, and I have to say it was kind of weird for me commentating, because all of a sudden I realized that the guys I was commentating on weren't even born when I won. So that was like, oh my God, you are getting old. And when I look at the lap times that they were doing, they were like 11 seconds quicker than what we were doing when I was doing F3, and it was just like, wow.
That's probably the more powerful engines, resurfaced tarmac, better tyres, whatever, David. Yeah. Anyway, we've taken
obviously, but it's just the transit, the way that is all developed over those years. The cars, the tires, the tarmac. The engines probably had more power, but it was still fantastic to be there and witness, another, famous F3 race.
Now, David, we've taken more of your time than we intended. It's been great to have you. And before we say goodbye, for the viewers who want to keep updated with what you're doing, how best to follow you? Is there a website, social media? What's your preference?
TikTok, Twitter.
But Brabham Official is one. Obviously, Brabham Auto is another, and then myself, David Brabham, Brabs Racer on Twitter. So we do a fair amount of social media, and I'm an old guy still learning.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, it's been brilliant to have you on the show. Really appreciate your time. Thanks so much.
Yeah. All right, thanks, guys.
David Brabham.
Appreciate it.
Awesome.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Plenty more for Alex and I to talk about the Brazilian Grand Prix, or the Brazil Grand Prix, or the Sao Paulo Grand Prix, whatever you want to call it. But before we dive into the details of that, I want to just talk about what's going to happen later on today, tonight, depending on where you are in the world. It's what we're calling Go F1 Radio. It's a live audio chat show that happens on Twitter Spaces, and here's how you do it. You go to @Matthew Marsh HK on Twitter. That's my handle, and you'll see here in the purple box, set reminder. It's pretty straightforward, actually, ladies and gentlemen. You click on set reminder, and funnily enough, a reminder will be set. And as you can see, Monday the 15th is the date. It depends on where you are in the world, of course, but Monday 15th if you're in our time zone, which is Hong Kong and Malaysia. This is what it looks like. It's essentially like a conference call or a radio show with audience participation. Got great guests tomorrow, not only Alex Yoong, who's with me now, of course, but BBC Radio 5 Live's Jenny Gow and Mark Gallagher, who's had an extraordinary career as a journalist, commercial leader at Red Bull Racing, and then Cosworth, and is now very much in demand as a consultant and as a public speaker. He's got a new book coming out, and you'll be able to listen to Mark and also ask him questions later on today. So please do go to Matthew Marsh HK and set the reminder for our radio show. Now let's move on and look at the title fight. And if we've got, I think we've got the World Drivers' Championship standings. We can have a look at those. And of course, it was Sergio Perez in a strategic move for Red Bull Racing that stole that point for fastest lap at the end from Lewis Hamilton. Quite an important move, it looks like. So there we go, 332. I'm trying to do maths off the top of my head here, Alex. Is it 14 points now?
Yeah,
No.
14. Yeah, 14. Yeah, 14.
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah, 14 points. There we go.
Between the two of us.
Yeah. Oh, yes. I bow to your experience. But
brilliant.
look at that. 14 points, eh? And that's so it's so set up well because Mercedes looks so strong. Hamilton's big statement of intent today, didn't they? And we'll go through the tracks coming up as well. That's going to have a big bearing as well.
It's incredible to think 18 rounds of the championship so far and a 14-point difference. I mean, it really is. We keep saying it, but it really is a classic battle. There is the second half, if you like. It has now gone from this race. From the last race to this one, there are now only two that can win the World Championship. Valtteri Bottas had a mathematical chance last time. He absolutely can't this time.
Yeah, and there's some other great battles there, aren't there, Matt? I mean, the battle for fifth position is heating up between the two Ferraris and Norris as well. But yeah, everyone only wants to talk about is the championship battle because that's the big one.
It is the big one. But whilst we've got championships on the mind, let's have a quick look at the Constructors' Championship standings, because Mercedes have managed through their victory today to stay just about in the lead of the Constructors' Championship, and McLaren and Ferrari battling. I'm not sure we've got that right. I've got a feeling that Ferrari is now ahead of McLaren, actually, but we'll have to double check that, and we'll do an update on that later on. There's the bottom half of the Constructors' Championship. And Alex, I want to ask you a question here, which is moving away from the Constructors' Championship, and it is what your thoughts are on the sprint format.
Ooh, yeah, I'm still not sure about it. You know, you asked, we talked about this earlier in the year, and I'm like, yeah, I kind of like it, but I'm a bit old school. I don't like the messing with the format so much. I I still don't know how I feel about it. I really enjoyed the sprint format. I think because we had Hamilton starting from the back and it was exciting. But I still don't know what I feel about it. I'm still like this about it. I definitely don't like them calling Pole the winner of that race to be Pole. So that would be nice if they could change that. But other than that, I think they just keep on doing it for now. I mean, I don't think it should be in every race. I think strategic races, it works.
Well, Stefano Domenicali announced that the plan is for 6 races in 2022 to have the sprint format. And I think what's quite interesting is the sprint races we've seen have been, okay, right? The Saturday race, which we're not supposed to call it a race, but we're going to because it is a race, because the lights go out and there's a checkered flag at the end of it. But I think, so maybe those races haven't been particularly exciting, but the race weekend, I think, has been improved, hasn't it? By having qualifying on a Friday and then a race on Saturday. And so I've got a feeling that for next year also, again, none of this is absolutely confirmed, that to your point, pole position will be the person who was fastest in qualifying. And indeed, potentially that the grid for the Grand Prix on Sunday will be set by qualifying on Friday and then the sprint races for some extra points.
Yeah. And I think F1, I think F1 are making all the right moves. They've been adventurous. All the things that Liberty's been doing have been good stuff. And even though don't know how I feel about the sprint race, I like the fact that they're trying things. I like the fact that it is breaking things up, because the old Formula One, where we had every track looking exactly the same, every weekend looking exactly the same, was too monotonous and it wasn't going to survive in a modern environment.
Now, we did touch on the Constructors' Championship points earlier, and I do have an update for you that we showed you data that maybe our producer wants McLaren to come third in the Constructors' Championship. That's all I can imagine. But being more serious, actually, Ferrari is in third place at the moment. They've got a 31-point advantage over McLaren. That's really turned around over the last 2 or 3 races. We touched before on the upgraded hybrid system that Ferrari have got. So, Alex, I'm now going to put you on the spot, and I'm going to ask you to name your hero and your zero of the race today. And what I want you to do is I want you to say, my hero is Fred Bloggs, and then do the same for your zero. So that's something that you haven't had chance to prepare, ladies and gentlemen. Alex has been put on the spot, in the spotlight as well.
Well, the hero is very easy, right? Hero of the day has to be Lewis Hamilton. I mean, stunning drive. I'm seeing on Twitter now, some people are saying maybe inside the top 3 drives he's ever done. I certainly think one of these top 10 for sure, but he's had so many great races over the years, and this is definitely up there. Zero. Well, it's easy to blame Tsunoda. There weren't that many people making mistakes. Yeah, I don't think Tsunoda deserved a 10-second penalty. I think maybe a 5. But yeah, who else is making mistakes today? Tsunoda, I guess.
Okay, I'm with you. I'm going to go, not that I've been asked to do this, but I think that the zero should be Max, because...
I'll ask you. Or the stewards, Max.
Well, actually, no, the stewards. I think the race direction was poor. I think we need much more clarity on this. The rules to me are clear. If you force somebody off the racetrack. Yeah.
Sorry if I don't mind jumping in there. This is a confusing thing to me, because I've been a race steward now. I did it for the Asian F3. I was race steward for Formula E. I've done that a couple times now. And I've worked with Michael Massey. And Michael's, and we have conversations all the time about this, is about trying to get people to race more, meaning side-by-side stuff. And about having side-by-side stuff is the rules have to change, that you can't run people off the track, that you must leave space. So Michael's been about doing this. He's been about trying to create this. And it has been tough, because in Europe, they're very stuck in the mud. They like saying stuff like, let them race. But actually, it's not letting them, allowing people to run people off the track is not allowing them to race. It's actually it's ceasing the racing. It's stopping the racing. Because racing for me is overtaking, and you have to allow people to have space. So I was kind of confused, because I know Michael Massey's been big on this, and you can see some of the. There have been a few times this year where they've given people penalty for drivers running other drivers off the road, and I thought this was very clear. But again, it's a fight for the win, and it's Max Verstappen, and the pressure is always there because so many people love Max Verstappen. We saw it in the Schumacher years as well, and Yeah, I thought Michael was going to put his foot down and say, no, that deserves a penalty. Or maybe he did. Maybe he did refer it to the stewards, and the stewards were like, no, it's just racing. Let them race.
We had two drivers, and there's 4 stewards, of course. There were 2 drivers there. One, Roberto Moreno, another Macau Grand Prix winner, actually, interestingly enough, and also winner of the Formula Ford Festival, perhaps more importantly. I'm being only slightly ironic. And Vitantonio Liuzzi, I don't think it went to them because I think it would have taken longer to deliberate. And I'm totally with you, which is that the reason it's called the racetrack is the track is where you do the racing. And if the competitors are forcing each other off the racetrack, I don't think it's racing. And I think it reflects poorly on Max, actually, in this case, and on the championship.
And I know what they're going to say over the next. The argument of Red Bull is going to be, look, we tried to make the track. You see the line, the corner is turned. But we just braked a bit late and we ran wide. But again, that needs to change because sometimes people are like, oh, you ran wide. It wasn't intentional, so you won't get a penalty. It's still careless. It's just the onus is still on you to be in control of your car. You're a Formula One driver, for God's sake. We expect high standards from you. And just saying, oh, I just ran a bit wide. It wasn't intentional. I don't think that should be a get out of jail free card.
Definitely agree with you. And isn't it also the case that if Lewis had been behind Max and Max had run off the racetrack because he'd gone into the corner too fast and then had come back on the racetrack maintaining the lead over Lewis despite having been clearly off the racetrack, he would have maintained the advantage by going off the racetrack essentially, and he would have been asked to give that place up. So I don't understand why doing that and also pushing his competitor off. And I should say, I'm a massive Max Verstappen fan, and in many ways would like to see him win the championship this year. What I want to see is a battle that's appropriate. Yeah. It doesn't seem like it was today.
Yeah, I want a championship that goes down to the wire, which is what we're getting. It seems. I would like to see Verstappen win the championship actually, just because it's been so monotonous for so many years. The Mercedes domination has been very monotonous. They deserve all the credit. They deserve all the credit for sure. But yes, I think Verstappen should have got the penalty. I mean, Hamilton got the penalty for that incident at Silverstone, and he ran wide. He only got the penalty because they said he was going to run wide because his car was pointing past the apex, and he would have run wide by about 4 or 5 feet. Not much. Verstappen ran wide by a much greater amount, and he didn't get a penalty. So FIA are causing themselves more troubles, I think, in the future.
Yeah, definitely. Well, we've probably caused ourselves some trouble there, Alex. We'll probably get some
we have
some hate tweets from the partisans. That's good. Join in the conversation. We're ready. We're ready for you. Bring it on, ladies and gentlemen. And meanwhile, I think we should look ahead. Never look in the rearview mirror. Let's look ahead to the races that are coming up for the rest of the season. Thick and fast is a cliche, but here they are.
Yeah,
3 races to go in a 4-week period.
Yeah, so we said in Mexico that Brazil was good. We changed our minds in Mexico, didn't we? That first we thought Brazil was going to be a Red Bull track, but once we saw the form of Mercedes in Mexico, we said, okay, Brazil was going to be a Mercedes track now. And now I've seen even more, how Hamilton drove today. I'm going to say for sure Saudi Arabia and Abu Dhabi are going to be Mercedes tracks. So that's 2 out of 3. I think Qatar will still be a Red Bull track with those long corners. Medium to high speed corners, long medium speed corners. They're going to really favor the Red Bull. But Saudi Arabia, 2 out of 3 is going to be Mercedes tracks. And while Verstappen has a lead, it's only 14 points. So everything to play for still.
12 points, if I'm not mistaken. I'm going to double check that now because I might be now misleading you.
It's close.
Let's double check that while we talk. So it is close. So just 14. Thank you, Hoffman, in my ear telling me it's 14. So let's just quickly recap that because this is important because this is critical, right? So you're saying Qatar, you think the Red Bull should be a little bit faster than the next 2, Saudi and Abu Dhabi, the finale, probably favour the Mercedes. So
assuming that they both finish second to each other at those tracks, and say Verstappen wins at Red Bull, then that goes out at 21 points. And then the 2 more races there, if Hamilton wins those with Verstappen second, then it's still a 7-point swing in Verstappen's favor because Hamilton only take back 14 points. So definitely it's in, Verstappen's got the advantage here, but there are some big banana skins, and if Mercedes win in Qatar, whoa, if Mercedes win in Qatar, even though Verstappen is still leading that championship at that point, for me, it's firmly Hamilton with a big advantage for the rest of the year. So Red Bull, for me, they need to win in Qatar.
Well, that's good news number one, is it looks like the battle's going down to the wire. The other good news, Alex, I can tell you, just checking on Twitter here, is that we've got one message coming in straight away, which was from Ratio Ray, who's saying that the fair analysis is appreciated. So anybody who thinks we're not being fair, I've got evidence to suggest that at least one member of our audience says we're being fair.
Is it my mum?
So,
my mum's Twitter
good
account.
point. Where is my mother? Now, listen, before we end the show, we touched on Macau Grand Prix. They're supporting our show this weekend, so big thumbs up to the 68th Macau Grand Prix. It's live next weekend over there, 19th to the 21st. And a little bit of reflection from us, I think, Al, because you raced there properly in Formula 3, and then 2003, which feels like a long time ago, probably because it was. You came in as... Yeah, it's brilliant. This is you. You were the guest driver, one-off race. You'd been a Formula One driver only the previous year, and I was trying to make my way into sports car racing, and I'd been driving the car all season. And you came along, and you were obviously incredibly quick straight away. And I'm hoping that Hoffman, our producer, hardware, here's me on board. Looking very smooth. This must be driving back to the pit lane on an in-lap or something. Look at that.
Yeah, look at that. You put it on pole, mate. Yeah.
Well, I'm hoping that he did show. I hope. Yeah, look, see.
Yeah, there we go.
Legendary Charles Conn, and you there in third. Yeah. I think I was almost half a second faster than you. I can't remember the result of the race. You might be able to illuminate our viewers.
It's kind of like, it's my show, so I'm going to stick the knife in as much as I can.
Absolutely.
Never mind. Won't say anything about the fact that I missed all of practice because I crashed the car on the first lap.
There you go. Well, speaking about missing, I want to ask you, how much do you miss Macau?
It's Asia's biggest race. It's a really, really important race. And a lot of people outside Asia will understand this because it is. It's not the Formula One races that are the biggest race. For me, Macau is the most important race of the year because you get so much local content. A lot of teams and drivers, they get all the sponsorship is based on the Macau Grand Prix. And it needs to stay that way, I feel, because if it just becomes another FIA event, then it's going to lose its beauty, and then it's going to be in big trouble.
And the great news for fans, many of you perhaps watching this are Formula One fans, and you maybe have heard of Macau, you don't know how to view it. Well, the great news is it's being streamed live over the weekend. You can see the URLs there on the bottom of the screen. It's an amazing feat, actually, an achievement that the Grand Prix is going ahead in this COVID pandemic environment. It's uninterrupted, actually, last year and this year. Of course, all the competitors who are from overseas, such as Daryl Yoong, who I spoke to earlier today, he flew back he was at a race in the States. He's had 18. He's going to have to do 21 days in quarantine. That's how important the Macau Grand Prix is to people like Daryl.
Yeah, and it's the biggest race in the world, I think, that has both cars and bikes in the same weekend. Fantastic to watch.
Classic event. Yeah. Well, 45 minutes is almost up, and so I want to say a couple of things. I want to remind viewers that they can do some listening if they wish to later on today, this evening, tomorrow, depending on your time zone, with Go F1 radio. I believe I'm right in saying it's 9 a.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. London, 10 p.m. in the Hong Kong time zone. But if you go to Matthew Marsh HK on Twitter, you will soon find pinned to the top of my channel the reminder. You can set a reminder and then you'll be reminded, funnily enough. Join us on that conversation. Great cast, including Alex Yoong. Alex, if people want to follow you on social media, what handles should they apply?
Just Alex Yoong.
Just Alex Yoong.
Yeah. Well, not just Alex Yoong, it's my name anyway.
There you go. Just Alex Yoong. Please follow Alex Yoong. Please follow David Brabham. Please follow me, Matthew Marsh HK. It's great to have your support. We'll be seeing all of you next week when we're covering round 19 of the Formula One World Championship. It's been great to have you with us tonight. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.